And this afternoon, we'll get the first look at a bipartisan Senate bill that could change the social media landscape by refining or even reining in or even banning apps like TikTok. So joining us now to talk about how that could impact social media companies is Angelo Zeno, Senior Equity Analyst at CFRA Research. Thank you for joining us, Angelo. Right off the top, we want to know, what kind of impact are you expecting from this potential ban?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think if we actually see a ban here, I think, at the end of the day, it'd be a positive for the likes of Snap, Meta, and Alphabet's YouTube business. But I think the question, of course, is what's the likelihood we actually see a ban take place? I think it's definitely a positive that kind of Democrats are now stepping in. And they seem like they're more kind of warming up to the idea of banning TikTok here. You are going to get a proposed bipartisan bill today at 3 p.m. Coming out with some details there on that side of things. So it is starting to gain some steam, we think, in Congress in terms of a potential ban out there. We're still placing a less than 50% probability of that taking place. But when you actually think about where we were 6 months ago, I would have told you there'd probably be about a less than 10% probability of that actually taking place. So the fact that the probability is actually going up, I think is definitely a good thing here for a lot of these existing, social media companies out there.
Briefly, can you refresh our memory of what the sticking point is with Democrats who may not want this ban?
Yeah, well, listen, I think as far as when you start thinking about what Democrats are kind of mindful of, is you've got an actual election taking place in 2024, right? You've got an app that's actually extremely popular and actually helped the Democrats win the election a couple of years ago. So I think Democrats out there are extremely careful, or trying to be careful about the entire situation here. I think clearly we are seeing kind of intensifying pressures out there on the geopolitical side of things between the U.S. and China, and I think that at the end of the day is helping kind of push the probability of a potential ban out there. But I think at the end of the day, a lot of Democrats out there are very mindful of what we saw here from the Biden-Trump campaign and how Biden won there. And I think, at the end of the day, you kind of want to really be mindful going into a very important election year next year.
Makes sense. So let's talk about companies, stocks. Who stands to benefit the most in the United States?
Yeah, I think, listen, at the end of the day, the company that probably stands to benefit the most is Snap. And you kind of see it in the stock move yesterday and some, additional kind of movement here today. But, most people out there will say Meta as well as Alphabet's YouTube business will take the lion's share of the money out there should we potentially see a TikTok ban. And that's absolutely true. But we think Snap will be the biggest beneficiary for two reasons. One, Snap caters to the environment much better or much more closely in terms of demographics relative to TikTok out there in terms of kind of the Gen Z population. If you kind of look at the percentage of revenue exposure Snap is exposed to, or the user base relative to that of TikTok, it almost kind of mirrors each other in many respects in terms of the Gen Z exposure, 11 and 26 category. Now, when you think also, secondly, Snap's smaller scale also will be a benefit to them, because when you look at TikTok here, generated about 10 billion in revenue globally last year. You kind of look in 2023 and 2024, we're looking at about 13 billion and 18 billion subsequently, and you kind of look at about half of that coming from the U.S. alone. You look at Snap's revenue, less than $5 billion relative to Meta's at about 120 billion or so. Alphabet's closer to 300 billion. Clearly, there's going to be a bigger impact if Snap can just take about 10% of TikTok's kind of potential revenue in the U.S. So we think that's going to be the biggest winner out there if we were to see a ban. Now, also on the Meta Alphabet side of things, the bigger positive from them is the fact that you don't have that potential juggernaut out there in TikTok over the next 3 to 5 years that could potentially steal more revenue from them. So they should also be a benefit as well.
It's really interesting when you think about it, because it's like YouTube was the first video sharing app, right? And then we have Snapchat, which was probably the most popular at some point. It definitely was the most popular short-term, short-form video app. What's the likelihood that all these remaining apps, all these remaining social media video sharing sites could duke it out with more products, more services possibly? Might we see some of that heating up the competition?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think at the end of the day, I mean, clearly these companies are all starting to kind of step on each other's toes in many respects. I mean, what TikTok has really done here over the last couple of years with their shorter form video format really has disrupted the entire industry, and it's really forced the likes of Meta and Alphabet, right? Meta with Reels and Alphabet even kind of trying to go more shorter form in nature, and that's really kind of had a negative impact on their revenue base, of course, because shorter form videos aren't going to generate as much ad revenue just because you'll be spending less time on there. So these companies are all going to kind of go on top of each other, but I think, you know, also when you kind of think about the likes of a Snap going more into subscription revenue, and they've actually seen some great success here in the initial, couple of quarters. I think you'll start seeing more emphasis on diversifying kind of away from the ad side of things, and I think that should also kind of, help kind of offset some of the challenges we're seeing from just a more competitive landscape out there, not only between each other, but also from kind of alternatives out there, whether it be kind of the Amazons, the Netflix, and what have you of the world.
All right, Angelo Zeno, thank you so much for being here. He's Senior Equity Analyst at CFRA Research.